entitled parents. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this video. ED calls me racist when I don't let him into a no entry room, and aggressively grabs at my chest for my tag to get in himself. Okay, first up, the formatting may be weird because I'm on mobile. Also TDLR at end. Anyway, so ED entitled Dad K his kid. Today was an opening evening for parents at school, and for some reference, I go to a grammar school, so it gets quite busy on these days, and many students often to get asked to help out, which included today. I got asked to take round DD and K on a tour around school, which would take 2 hours if I took the allocated route. School is really big. When I was about to take them round, he said that he only had 15 minutes spare and asked me if I could take him around in that time. I told him that I would not be able to take him to many places. We eventually narrowed it down to the bottom floor of the main school building, though he got really annoyed and impatient that we couldn't explore more than that in 15 minutes. Anyways, so we got through most the bottom floor, until we reached the end of a corridor. At the end of this was the entrance to the art section. However, there were exams going on in there, and it was strictly forbidden for students, especially the parents going round the open evening, to go in there, in case of disrupting people doing their exams. ED asked me if I could go through there, and I politely said that we couldn't. Then, he suddenly got really mad, saying there's other people in there. You're not letting me in because I've got darker skin than you. All you white people are so freaking racist. ED was Asian, not much darker than me anyways. I'm 25% English, 25% German, 50% Bangladesh, so I had a slightly tan complexion, but it would be easy to mistake me for being of white ethnicity. I kept as calm as possible, and politely explain, I am sorry that you feel like that, but I have no prejudice against anybody based on their natural appearance. Please do not make such assumptions. I would feel inclined to say that you're slightly racist yourself, speaking about white people as a collective and grouping us all into this negative category that doesn't fit all of us. And please do not scream profanities at me either. If I went into the art block, I would get a detention. There's cameras covering every inch of this building. It clearly says no entry to students or visitors on the door, and newsflash, I'm a student and you're a visitor. His face creases up in rage and replies with, excuse me, do not speak to me with such disrespect. I am older than you, which means you must listen to me. There are so many people in there. I want to see the world famous paintings and artwork that is up there, and my daughter loves art. Why can't you make an exception? You're a freaking retard. Who even raised you? You're so impolite and can't even let parents in on opening day. What sort of bullcrap is this? Before I could say anything, he swiftly grabbed for my lanyard at my chest, the thing you use to tag doors which unlocks them, and unlocked the door. I don't think it was his intention to touch me in the manner that he did, but I'm extremely well developed for 14 and it hurt really bad. I also have a really long history of rape and sexual harassment, and this triggered my trauma. I kinda just fell to the floor and started crying uncontrollably because old memories came back. ED heard me sobbing and turned around, looking at me funny. The teachers got alerted when the art door opened, because the bell rings, and came over. It probably looked like me punched me to the floor, the way I was sat. My favorite teacher took me into her classroom and asked what was up, and I told her. I'm not extremely sure what happened to ED. I'm guessing he probably just got kicked out the school grounds or something. TDLR open evening at school, ED insists on going through the art block. But I say he isn't allowed to because there are ongoing exams. He tells me that I'm not letting him in because he has darker skin than me. He then goes on to aggressively grab at my chest for my tag, and gets in himself. It triggered my PTSD and I started crying a lot because I have a long history of rape and sexual harassment, and don't like being touched by strangers. Update: the school contacted my parents and asked me if I wanted to take any legal action. We're already tied up in this other legal business with some dodgy person living in my dad's rental house for free. and couldn't be bothered to press charges, so we didn't. EM makes the birth of my son about her tragedy 30 plus years ago. Cell phone, sorry for any weird formatting. So my mother is a Karen but also a Kevin. Entitled and narcissistic with absolutely no sense of timing or honestly common sense. A little background on her that is relevant is my mom has been through serious trauma, 2 very abusive relationships with her baby daddies, rape, miscarriages and a stillborn, and loss of 3 children. And I fully understand that's not something that is easily gotten over, for lack of a better term. However, my mother is the biggest attention whore on earth and will exaggerate flat out lie to get any kind of sympathy she can when telling her tragic stories, and believe me, she tells them very often. My mother embellishes a lot. And I know this simply due to having heard these stories so often that I pick up on the conflicting new details. This in mind, onto the story. I just gave birth to my son 5 weeks ago. He is my second child. During the first 2 days my son lost 12% of his body weight and had to have an extended stay as we frantically tried to get his weight back up and figure out why he wasn't gaining. 5 weeks later and his chunky butt is perfectly fine BTW. But during these few days I was a nervous wreck and also missing my toddler who was staying with my mother. So on the most hectic day of the hospital stay my husband had to return to work and I was having an emotional breakdown. My mother came with my daughter to offer support. I was grateful but very quickly ended up losing my temper. Enter my mom. She immediately decided to make this room her stomping grounds for attention. The nurses were in my room nearly constantly with my son, taking him in and out of the room, checking on him and me, etc. Every nurse got trapped by my mother, who would pick up my son and make this huge display of caring on him, kissing him, which she was told many times not to, and generally making an obnoxious, fake fuss over him in their presence. When that didn't warrant her enough attention, she changed her strategy. The pediatrician switched my son to a high-calorie formula and we fed him with a tube and a syringe, and the nursing staff was in the room each feeding to help me. Mom used this to her advantage. She would immediately bring up my brother, who was sick the moment he was born and died a horribly painful death at 15. She brought up how terribly sick he was, how she was told he wasn't going to live and he was even smaller than this one, gesturing to my son who then weighed just under 7 pounds. Then she would say how he was so messed up because his father beat me so severely when I was 7 months pregnant that it damaged my baby and I was on bed rest until he was born. That went to how my biological father raped her and held her hostage in an abusive relationship. She brought up how her babies, my 2 older brothers, were born very prematurely and both died in the hospital. One of them had a tube to feed him too. And both of them failed to thrive and she had to watch her newborns die. This is not what I want to hear when my seemingly healthy newborn dropped a pound in weight in 2 days and went from breastfeeding like a champ to being fed with a tube, with the hospital staff debating putting a feeding tube in. Whenever the pediatrician or my OB came in to talk to me, check on us, my mother would interrupt to ask some ridiculously stupid question like, so if he has to have a feeding tube to get his weight up, it will come back out right? Then she would interject her sad stories of her sick, dying babies and her rape abuse pain. After hearing this for the 10th time in just a few hours, and I forgot to mention my 2-year-old who repeats everything, was in the room and she has since picked up the word rape, I broke down and cried. I ugly cried while holding my newborn to my chest and my daughter cuddled at my side. My mom looked at me, then wiped a non-existent tear and said, I look just like that, crying just like that. When I held my babies for the last time, I finally flipped mid-tears and screamed at her to stop making it about her, that not everyone wants to hear her abuse stories on repeat for hours, that my baby, her grandson, was the sick babies, and hearing how her sick babies died was not only not being supportive, it was being cruelly insensitive. She looked at the nurse and blamed my outburst on my hormones, then laughed. But Nurse of the Year immediately fired back and told her to sit down, shut up, and show concern over her daughter and grandson before she had her removed from the hospital. My mom tried once more to get sympathy and attention when the pediatrician came back in. He too cut her off, apologized somewhat for her previous misfortunes, but made it clear that her babies were not his patients. She left shortly after, and besides dropping my daughter off back home a few days later, she has refused to come over since, as I ganged up against her. Sweet, sweet quiet relief. Oh, you survived. Now sub. Please.